Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com, here with How I Discovered, and I want to hear how you discovered, Saint-Saëns. Oh, what a wonderful composer who wrote just gobs of beautiful music. I'm still discovering Saint-Saëns. We all are, because Bruzen has those wonderful operas coming out. I got to talk about all of those. They're really nifty. But at the moment, we're talking about way back at the dawn of time, when I didn't know who he was. All I knew was that his name was Saint-Saëns, and I've learned to pronounce it slightly better, but probably still not correctly, because I call him Saint-Saëns, and some people say it's Saint-Saëns. It's like, who cares? I don't want to know. Do not even bother to start with that, or you will be banned forever. Just trust me, it's not worth it. Anyway, how did I discover Saint-Saëns? Well, it was sort of interesting. The first work that I ever heard of his was the Danse Macabre, and I heard it like so many of us did because it was used in cartoons. It was on TV. I didn't know who wrote it. I mean, they never tell you who wrote it, but there was one of those Halloween cartoon things, where the skeletons come out and they play the xylophone on their rib cages and whatnot. Well, that's what the Danse Macabre does. That's the whole point of it, actually. And so I knew the tunes. And at one point, I don't know how many of you remember this, but Reader's Digest had a wonderful series of classical recordings that they issued in volumes. They were very nicely packaged, and it was like the greatest classics and the greatest symphonies. There were like 3 or 4 volumes of these things, and my grandmother had them, my mother's mother, and I would go through them. And they had some very interesting things. They had the Night on Bald Mountain and the Stokowski Orchestration. Jascha Horenstein did a lot of the conducting on those things. It was probably his best period, actually. Some of those recordings really weren't so terrible. But they were multi-volume sets, 10 discs in a box. I don't know, there were a lot. There was a lot of music there. And we would go to visit my grandmother in Wilmington, Delaware, and grandfather, and she had this stuff. And so I was, of course, a music geek from the time I was like 6. And she had a stereo, and I also liked stereos. I liked gadgets. I really did. I liked audio equipment. And, that was, when you're a kid, it's sort of amazing, actually. When you're a kid, if you're into gizmos and gadgets, stereos are like really high end when you're really small. And it's one of the most sophisticated devices that you can play with. I mean, the others all involve work, power saws or vacuum cleaners or, toaster ovens, things like that. That's stuff that, you don't want to get too close to. But audio equipment, oh dear, audio equipment was cool. And Grandma had a decent stereo. I remember all of my relatives' audio equipment for some reason. But, some people had those giant console stereos that were made by Zenith or Magnavox or something. And automatic record changers where you could stack them all up and watch the records fall individually. I mean, that was all a reason for me to just listen to the music, just to watch the mechanics of it, actually. So she had these volumes, and I sort of worked my way through them. We really miss that now. There is no mechanism. Of course, we've got streaming everything and all that. I understand. But to create these popular editions that had a captive audience, because it's everybody who was reading Reader's Digest, would see these things. It was a huge readership, a huge amount of subscribers, and they would buy all of these things, and most of them would sit in their bookshelf, and nobody would ever take them out and listen to them. I get it, but they could say that they had it, and they were cultured as a result. It was a thing to own that stuff. So in one of these things was the Danse Macabre, and as I was listening through, I finally heard it. And of course, I immediately recognized the bits that were, used in the cartoons. And I went, aha! So that's what it was. That was really, really cool. And discovering a composer that way, because you know them from somewhere else and you're already familiar, that makes you feel really, really good. I mean, it really does. I mean, you have the satisfaction of discovery, the satisfaction of knowledge, the satisfaction of associating the music with something that you already know and understand and enjoy. I mean, it's really a fabulous thing to be able to do that, to be able to encounter pieces of music through the popular media. I'm all for it. I think classical music should be used and abused as much as possible in the popular media. I mean, if you watch the Justice Channel on cable, it's all court shows, you find that most of them use some version of Beethoven's Fifth as their theme. A bunch of really strange versions of Beethoven's Fifth. But anyway, the Danse Macabre was one of them. It wasn't until much later that I heard the Carnival of the Animals, which is one of the ways that a lot of people come to Saint-Saëns. I didn't know that until years later, because after the Danse Macabre, I got into some of his heavy-duty stuff, particularly the Third Symphony. Not being a fan of organ music, particularly, especially when, in my lower teens and single digits, it was, again, the audiophile angle, because if you had a good stereo, you had to have the organ symphony. And all of the recordings of it in those days were pushing it as, blockbuster repertoire. At least the ones in the United States, Ormandy and those people. It was like, organ spectacular, the organ symphony. And I got a copy of the organ symphony somehow, somewhere. I got one. I don't know which one it was. I don't even remember which one it was, to be honest with you. And I remember putting on and thinking, gee, there isn't much organ in this thing at all, is there? I mean, it's very quiet, the second movement. You may not even notice it. And then, of course, finally it comes in the finale with some big, yummy block chords and things like that. You go, oh, okay, so that's the organ, big deal. I wasn't impressed at all by the fact that it had an organ in it, but I loved the work. I really did. I thought it was absolutely gorgeous. In fact, what attracted me most to it wasn't the organ parts at all. It was the theme of the first movement. Chugga 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 boom boom chugga 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 chugga. That sort of fidgety, French Mendelssohn style of minor key anxiety. I really like that. I really do, and I just thought that was gorgeous. And so from that point on, I started exploring Saint-Saëns more often. I had Arthur Rubinstein doing the Second Piano Concerto. Eventually, I got the Carnival of the Animals, and the other symphonic poems, and of course the thing that just blew me away when I was a kid was Samson and Delilah. I loved Samson and Delilah. The Bacchanal was what I heard first, of course, because that was another fabulous orchestral excerpt that you found on, collections of, for people who don't know much about classical music. I loved the Bacchanal. And then I heard on the radio, on WQXR, the New York Times radio station back when it existed, the final scene. Stokowski, I think, recorded the final scene. Somebody did the final scene with all of the singing and screaming in it. And I just loved it. I mean, the idea that it was a bunch of Philistines having an orgy with this cute little music box, Gloire à Dagon vainqueur, il aidait ma faiblesse. It's a strict canon between Delilah and the grand prêtre, and they're singing in canon, and then the choir comes in, and there's a little glockenspiel tinkling in the background, going, pour que le sang soit favorable à l'encens, viens avec nous à Dagon, le Dieu redoutable, offrir ton groupe à deux genoux. I mean, that's whatever that was. I mean, it was just, tinkly. It was all so pretty. I mean, and so not sexual or pagan or any of the things that the story seemed to foretell. But then, of course, at the end, the whole thing collapsed and tam-tams are crashing and everyone's screaming, and I thought that was marvelous. So I was hooked. Those were the things that got me into Saint-Saëns, and those are the things that were my major discoveries. Carnival of the Animals came much later. So I'm very interested to know how you first discovered Saint-Saëns. What pieces did you hear? What attracted him to you, or you to him? And let me know. He's such a good composer, and he's always, and also, when people make lists of composers, it just seems to be so unfair. because he really, really had the gift. Anyway, keep on listening, friends. Thanks for joining me. Take care.